In this video, we're going to talk about how Chrono Odyssey can actually make a comeback, which is a little bit weird because it's not even released yet. But in this video, I'm going to give 7 major things that they need to address before we see the game again, either in the closed beta test 2 or its actual release. So let's jump in. Now, it's worth noting that not everybody's going to agree with every single point on this list, but I think it's going to cover the bulk amount of feedback. But do let me know if something that you didn't like and that you think needs addressing should have been mentioned here. We'll start with the most obvious 2. The graphics. Everybody has seen that visually Chrono Odyssey does not look like the trailer. I mean, it's not even vaguely close, which is a little bit weird, by the way, because Bongum Bay, who is the CEO of the company, basically said that it is actually the same asset. Now, I don't know if the trailers though have just been like pre-rendered using the same assets, or maybe they have a setting beyond cinematic that they can use for the trailers. Either way, that's a kind of crazy thing to believe because obviously there is a vast visual difference between the gameplay and what we saw in the trailers. Now, in my opinion, when you're like in the tree foliage and in the canopy underneath the branches and stuff, the game doesn't look that bad. But then when you go out onto the rocks and you look over the vast distances, yeah, it looks pretty awful. So how do you fix this? Well, for a lot of people, it boils down to the lighting. I think the lighting is definitely part of this. The lighting and sort of like the color saturation or the vibrancy just seems completely off. I think the lighting is often making it look a little bit like washed out or overexposed, and visually it doesn't look that particularly great. I think the lighting will be a big part of it if they can fix that and still have a reasonably performant game. One thing that they do, which is kind of wild, is that they actually have this system where the clouds are casting shadows and stuff like that. At this point, I would consider maybe just getting rid of that and going with like more simple lighting. Now, I'm not a developer, I don't know how long that will take, but I think obviously you can tweak sandboxes, tweak colors, tweak lighting strength and stuff like that. My kind of like amateurish opinion here is that maybe there should be like a global luminancy that's turned up a little bit and then have a light source, because often what I saw in the game was that if there was a strong sun in the sky, the shadows would be very, very dark. Like sometimes you can barely see your character, and then the places where it was in the sun were very, very bright. So maybe have this sort of like global illumination so you can always see your character, but also have the lighting effect so that you can have, you know, realistic lighting. That's how I would maybe consider approaching that. But again, I really have no idea what I'm talking about there. One thing though with the graphics as well, I don't just think it is that. I think there's also the textures of the rocks, the rock textures and the popping and stuff like that. They were not helping the situation. In the vast distances, for example, the rocks looked not that great, and when you were close up they didn't look that great because sometimes they would like pop in later. Now that's obviously like a performance setting, but I actually just think the rock texture not necessarily that visually pleasing, and neither was in the starting area, at least the ground texture. I don't think that was very visually appeasing. The game did seem to have like this like fog that was everywhere, but admittedly thinks that they should have fog, but only to block off the very far distances. I'm not saying New World is a great game, but when I went back into New World just the other day and I went and stood upon a rock, once you get past a certain distance, you pretty much can't see anything because the volumetric fog is so thick. That might also help with performance as well. So that's just an idea that maybe they could do, because it's a little bit weird if you see very far away, you see that there's no foliage and stuff like that. It's just making the game look a little bit ugly. Overall, I think the graphics is something that they are going to have to focus on at this point. The naive version of me says this is Unreal Engine 5, surely there's something that they can do. I think they will do something. Whether or not it will be enough, I don't know. Now, actually, before we talk about the next one that's very obvious, we need to talk about one that goes hand in hand with the graphics, and that is performance. The performance of the game wasn't very good. A lot of people are like, I have a very, very, very good system. I'm running in high quality graphics and it's not particularly great. The frame rate's not particularly great. Some people did report that they had like mediocre systems but were doing fantastic. I don't know what's going on though, right? Obviously there's different systems involved and all that kind of jazz. Ultimately, the reason I'm not going to dwell too much on the performance is simply because typically in gaming, you do your performance enhancing at the end of when you've actually like designed the game and you're getting close to release. So I would not be overly surprised if the game has just simply not had its performance passes yet. So I'm not going to dwell on it. However, it would be a concern if they end up releasing the game with such poor performance. Again, maybe Unreal Engine 5 here can help them because, you know, they're talking about like nanite foliage and stuff like that at this point. I don't really know. We'll have to wait and see. Hopefully they can fix that one. And then the next obvious one is obviously going to be the movement. This is one that weirdly, I didn't really pick up on at all. And I think it's because partly I don't really look at my character. When I'm playing the game, I sort of look where my character's going. And as long as my character's vaguely in the right place, I'm not really paying attention to them. But then when everybody saw us playing, when we were streaming, when people pointed it out, I looked at my character's sliding about like they're on ice skates when you go, when you're running forward and you do AD. And yeah, it's a little bit janky, let's just be honest, right? And I think there's probably two main solutions that they can do with the movement. One of them is simply to turn off the inertia so that if you do run forward and you press AD, you don't get sliding, you get literally like very snappy movements. That might also apply when you press W, you actually just run at full speed like instantly. And then the second solution might be a bit more dramatic, but is to go to what I think Elden Ring has and what I think New World has. Well, I know New World has it. And that's basically an option to have free form movement, which is a little bit awkward to explain until you see it. But basically, let's say you're running forward and then you stop and you press back, like you run back, your character will actually just turn around and run towards you. So if you press W and A to like try and strafe off, instead of strafing to the side, your character will actually just face to the side and run in that direction. Obviously, combine that with the lack of inertia and you could just have a very crisp, solid movement, which I think a lot of people would like. Can they tweak this? Yes. Will they tweak this? Yes, it's one focus that they've said they're going to address. One thing that I would also maybe put in this category though is the sprint. The sprint is ugly and feels awful as well. And honestly, I think games with like manual sprints, do you know, I kind of dislike them, especially MMOs that you play all the time. I just probably want it to be removed. Maybe increase the running distance, like the normal running speed a little bit, but then get rid of the sprint. Some games have it and it works. I don't know if MMOs it really works. Personally, I'm not a big fan. That's just a personal pet peeve. I don't know if that's necessarily what everybody else is really thinking about when it comes to movement. I think it's all about this sliding and this ice skatey feeling, and the mantling not being very crisp feels a little bit jank. We'll get on to the next one, which is another personal pet peeve of mine, but I actually think it ties a little bit in with the movement, and that is the lack of an FOV or further out zoom. Well, one thing that was really annoying is that when you did zoom out, whenever you like teleported or you moved instances or anything like that, the zoom would reset, so you'd end up having to zoom out and you maybe not realize you zoomed out. And yeah, that was just awkward. But I do actually think there should be a little bit extra zoom out, and I do think there should absolutely be an FOV slider. Now, why is that? Well, put simply, for me and some others in my chat, not everybody's affected by this, but it does cause motion sickness. Now, some people get motion sickness for all different kinds of reasons. Some people get it because the FOV is actually too high. Some people get it because it's too low. For me, it's that combination. If the character is like really zoomed in and I can't FOV my way out of it, then it causes some big significant issues for me and I start feeling a little bit sick, which I wonder if that's why some people didn't like the movement either, because overall they might not necessarily be able to like realize it, but maybe the actual game was making them a little bit like, a little bit unwell, and they just say, oh, well, I don't like this movement. So I do think that a zoom out or at least an FOV slider would be very helpful. And combined with the FOV slider, this is more of a class specific one, but when you zoom in with the bow, when you right click and aim down sights, I don't think it should zoom in quite as much. Weirdly, I think New World absolutely nailed this. I think New World's movement are actually kind of good with the freeform movement, but let's not talk about that too much. With New World, what it does when you right click and you aim down sights is that it puts you into the furthest zoom that you can do. It doesn't give you an extra zoom, it puts you in as close as you could possibly be. Now, why is that good? Well, one, if you have your character, you have your camera settings at that level anyway, let's say you liked it, you don't get that zooming in and out effect. But two, the FOV when you're zoomed in, just very, very, very ugly, and for me, not pleasing at all, and it made the character of the Ranger very difficult to play. Not in terms of game difficulty, but I think this is a very simple fix. They just need to be persuaded to actually do it. Just actually do it. Just add it in. I'm sick and tired of games not doing it, being like, we want it to be cinematic. Yes, I kind of agree. Don't have me zoom out to the moon so that I can see the entire game and my character's a little dot, but just make it so that we can actually play the game without feeling motion sick, right? I get it that you want this like high octane action, and other games have done it like Monster Hunter, and I think even like Dark Souls and stuff like that. Warframe's another. I just don't like it, right? And it makes people motion sick, and I don't really see the alternative or the problem with zooming out just a little bit more. Next one on the same kind of vibe is camera shake. Just let us turn it off. I don't think anybody really needs to talk more about that. Some people really don't like it. For me, I'm not that bothered by camera shake. It actually makes me feel more immersed to have camera shake. But in a game like New World, I had to turn it off because it was effectively hurting my performance in PvP, which sounds weird. It sounds like really like, oh, I'm very nerdy, I want to be better. But it actually just is a big distraction in PvP. In a PvE game, I'm not really sure it matters too much, but a lot of people don't like it, so just let us turn it off. I like the fact that you could have there was a motion blur slider. That was kind of good though. The next one is one that I've also spoken about and maybe overly spoken about, and that is the difficulty. Now, bear with me. I'm not even going to claim here that the game is too hard. I think I'm over that as an idea. I did originally think that, right? I think when you play the game of Chrono Odyssey and you get sent to the first boss at 30 minutes in, and you get your ass handed to you a couple of times and you're like, I'm not even sure I'm going to be able to do this. I was like, I think this is going to be a big problem. I think people are going to quit. I do think people are going to quit though. In fact, there's actually a couple of like famous content creators who quit at that point. Probably not saying that they couldn't do it. I'm not going to accuse them that they couldn't do it, but I think it causes frustration and it means you don't really want to progress unless like if you're not enjoying the game. Which, to be honest, if you're not enjoying the game, then, I mean, it might as well be here than anywhere else. But I'm not going to suggest that they change the difficulty. What I am going to suggest is that that difficulty and the expectation is given to the player a little bit better. Yes, content creators have seen this now. Players have seen this because of content creators and they've tried the beta. Yes, people are expecting it now, but there will still be people who don't see any of this. They'll buy the game, they'll play it, and if it is as like as it is now, they'll get wrecked, and some of them will quit. What they need there is a little bit more information, maybe even move the boss a little bit so that there's more of an expectation that you need to leave and come back. Or if you die like the first time, I think Mr. O said this, if you die like the first time, say, hey, this is going to be a tough challenge for the level that you're at. Why don't you go out, grind, don't say grind, but go out, level up, get some gear, finish some extra quests and then come back. Sort of tell people that you're not absolutely stupid or awful for not being able to do this at level 3. You absolutely can do it at level 3. I think most people will be able to. It's just a case of like getting the mechanics and stuff like that. And to be fair, the rest of the game isn't quite as challenging as that first boss because you can level up and you will level up and you will get gear and you'll probably be at the right level for all of the other areas. Just this first boss that I think is a bit of an issue. But I'm not asking for it to change. Just better information, better expectation. The next one though is going to be about quest tracking and quest markers. I do agree with some of the feedback here. It's very difficult to know where to go or why to go into certain places. For example, I think Waydots was having an issue where he was trying to find, well, he had a quest that was basically go back to the first cave, right? Because he didn't do it the first time. And he went to where it was on the map and he couldn't do anything because there was no indication that it was actually back to the first cave. So he didn't go underneath the ground. That's just one example, but it applies to a lot of the quests. Even if there is a map on the marker, you kind of don't know where to go or what to do. Now, you could argue here, read quests and stuff like that. For example, the bounty quests that a lot of people are struggling with. The lady who's right there, once you've picked up a bounty quest, if you talk to her, she gives you more information on where you can expect to find the bounty. I don't think in this day and age people are going to be doing this, right? They're not going to read the quest, and the developers should realize they're probably not going to read the quest. So give them a little bit more of a hand holding. A lot of people aren't going to like that, but I think they just probably should. Probably don't even really need to change much. I think there's only really 2 things you need to change here. One, I would add like a height marker on the quest objective. So if you're well above the quest objective, it tells you to go down, and vice versa. I think that's completely reasonable. And 2, I think if you look on your map, all of the quests that you have should be tracked on the map unless you have like an option to remove it, right? I completely understand how you can't have like 15 quests on the side of the screen, but if I'm looking at my map, I want to see where's the nearest quest, right? I don't have to go into my journal and toggle them on and off to see which one's closest to me. I just want to look at the map and see it. So I think if they did those 2 things, then the quest markers and quest tracking would feel a lot better. And one I don't really agree with is a mini map. Now, I do sort of agree with the mini map, but I also don't think it's that important that they should actually change this or add this. If they maintain that they don't want it in the game, then don't add it in the game. Like, I really don't think it's that important. A lot of people are going to be like, but mini-maps, there's no downside to them. And yeah, I kind of agree, right? It's a bit weird to have to keep pressing the map button to see where everything is, only for the map button not to actually track all the quests. And I think that does take you out of it. A mini-map obviously would reduce that. But I don't necessarily have a problem with the compass idea. I do think it keeps the UI relatively clean. The compass obviously could do with a little bit of an improvement. But what I would say here is, I'm neither for it or against it really, but what I would say is I don't think most people are going to not play a game because it doesn't have a minimap. There'll be somebody in chat's like, I'm never playing this game if it has no minimap. Fair enough, but I think the percentage of people who are not going to play it for that very reason, probably very small. If the game's good, which I'm not saying it is right now, but if the game's good, this ultimately won't matter. If the game's bad, then we'll nitpick everything. Right, there's one that we need to talk about, which, I mean, I kind of agree and I kind of don't agree, and that is combat. I'm not putting this in the list that I think they need to change this because I think they could leave this as it is. I do think that some of the animations, probably from the movement into like the translation from movement into combat, and maybe the translation from combat moves to other combat moves, could possibly feel a little bit janky. But ultimately, I sort of enjoyed the combat. It may not be great for PvP, but then this isn't a PvP game, and you might not like it, but then if you don't like the core fundamental of the combat, you're probably not going to change your mind anyway at this stage. There are people who simply don't like action combat MMOs, and you're not wrong, right? That's completely fair to do. There's nothing wrong with not liking action combat MMOs and thinking that tab target reigns supreme. You know, it's your choice, it's your call. I can't change your mind. But I think a lot of action combat Andes, I mean, it felt fine. It sort of felt a little bit flashy. I'm not going to call it perfect. I think there's obviously things that they could improve, but ultimately for me, the combat was very, very okay. And I think if they fix the movement and the zoom out and stuff like that, the combat will actually start feeling a lot better. There's a couple of other things that I think they need to fix or change, but they're not necessarily massive. For example, I think they could do with changing the blue and red trees. They're just a little bit like so similar to New World. I don't think they necessarily need it. Some people will be unhappy with the different types of mobs. I actually think the mob variety was sort of okay, but you do see a lot of the skeletons early, so maybe mix it up at the start. One thing that I also didn't necessarily see as a major issue, but it looks like Bongon Bay and the team at Chrono Studios do, and that is the completely hideous, monstrous characters that some people made. Yes, it probably does need to be toned down, and yes, they are going to do that. I wasn't personally bothered by it. I don't know who wants to look like a weird kind of homunculus, you know, for many hours, but people were bothered by it. Probably just need sliders so you can't have like weird lumps and maybe even like weird green characters. So yeah, I mean, it's going, it's gone. Let's not worry about it. I don't personally like how you restart the trials and the labyrinths when you die. If you die, you just go back to the start, or in the case of the trial, you just get kicked out. Not a fan of how that feels. But yeah, ultimately, I think the ones that we spoke about are the major ones, and hopefully I talked about how they could possibly address it. I think if they addressed all of this list, the game would be pretty okay. It would be pretty decent, right? I'm not saying the game's ever going to become like a top 3 MMO. I'm not going to say it's not going to replace like World of Warcraft or Final Fantasy or anything like that. But if they manage to get a handle on some of these issues, which some of them I think, do you know what? I think most of them are actually, I don't want to say easily fixable, but relatively easily fixable on the grand scheme of things. These aren't problems that aren't solved by other games that they've got to uniquely face and figure out themselves. These are issues that games have solved before. They're on the Unreal Engine 5 engine, for example. They're not working with like some completely unknown entity. This is something that they should, I think, be able to get a handle on. And if they do, then I still think the game will be pretty decent. We'll get quite a few months out of it. If they don't, then we're possibly in trouble. And we're all waiting for those videos and CBT2 tests and all that kind of jazz. Otherwise, I'm joining canon and hoping that Ion 2 is good. For now though, let me know your thoughts. Did I miss anything? Have a most beautiful day. Like and subscribe. Goodbye.